think we're live. I'm trying to make sure that my microphone can pick up my voice. So, of course, right when I do this, it's going to be all squirrely. All right, I think that will work. Good noon, everyone. I'm Pastor K.C., Director of Family Ministries and Associate Pastor at Foundry. It's good to be with you on this sun-shining Monday. There was quite a bit of a blizzard yesterday that then promptly melted away. And today the sun is out. I think it's still cold, but I can see the sun shining through my windows and it's making me feel all warm inside. So, as always, I get to be the one to recommend worship to you from yesterday. Pastor Ginger preached a powerful sermon. The music was phenomenal. There's a piece in worship that just brings me to tears every single time. So I hope that you'll check that out. I also want to mention that we're starting to figure out ways to put those musical selections on the website and on YouTube. And so I hope that you'll check those out. It sometimes makes it easier if you can just go find the musical selection instead of having to go back and reference in the middle of the service. So yeah, hopefully that'll be something that you all are interested in. I want to do a small plug for the Auto Parent podcast because we recorded episode 5 yesterday, and one of my clergy colleagues and friends, the Reverend Corey Alexander Willett, was a guest on the Auto Parent podcast, and I don't think I've laughed that hard in years. It was amazing. She's a dog mom and had all kinds of wonderful insights about parenting. So I hope you'll check that out. It drops live Wednesday at 6. That's when the new episodes come out weekly. So yeah. It would be cool if you check that out. I also want to mention too, it's not too late to sign up for a kids Lenten and Easter box. So if that's something that you think you would enjoy, it's really family oriented. There's a lot of family activities and stuff, and it's a really, really great box. So yeah, there's all kinds of fun stuff. It's hard to believe that we are like 2 weeks away from Lent. Pastor Ginger said that on Sunday, and I had a visible reaction on my face because I was like, there's no way. Like, it feels like it was just Advent. So yeah. Anyway, I wanted to share with us a parable today from this lovely book, The Orthodox Heretic by Peter Rollins. Peter Rollins is kind of a new agey philosopher. I think we've talked about him in a good noon before. And yeah, he did this book, Orthodox Heretic and Other Impossible Tales, where he kind of rewrites some parables and gives some interesting twists and turns to some of Jesus's parables. And yeah, it's a really cool book. And after each parable, there's a little bit of commentary. So yeah, I want to share this parable with you. It's called Awaiting the Messiah. It's very Lenten. I talked about waiting in the children's message on Sunday. It's very of the moment. So, Awaiting the Messiah. There is an ancient story that speaks of a second coming of the Messiah. It is said that he arrived anonymously one dull Monday morning at the gates of a great city to go about his father's business. There was much for him to do. While many years had passed since his last visit, the same suffering was present all around. Still there were the poor, the sick, and the oppressed. Still there were the outcasts, and still there were the righteous who pitied them, and the authorities who exploited them. For a long time, no one took any notice of this desert wanderer with his weather-beaten face and ragged, dusty clothes, this quiet man who spent his time living among the sick and unwanted. The great city labored on like a mammoth beast, ignorant of the one who dwelt within its bowels. The story goes that the Messiah eventually decided to reveal his identity to a chosen few who had remained faithful to his teachings. These people met together in a tiny unknown church on the outskirts of the city to pray and to serve the poor. As the Messiah entered the modest sanctuary one Sunday morning, his eyes fell upon the tiny group huddled in the corner, each one praying and weeping for the day of the Lord. As they prayed, those who gathered in the church slowly began to feel the gaze of Christ penetrate their souls. Silence began to descend within the circle as they realized who had entered their sacred home. For a time, no one dared to speak. Then the leader of the group gathered her courage, approached Christ, fell at his feet, and cried, "We have waited so long for your return. For so many years, we have waited patiently for you to come. Today, as with every other day, we prayed passionately for your arrival." And then she stood up and looked Christ in the eyes. "Now that you are with us, we have but one question." Christ listened, knowing already what it would be. "Tell us, Christ, when will you arrive?" The Messiah did not answer, but simply smiled. Then he joined the others in their prayers and tears, and he remains there still to this very day, waiting, watching, and serving in that tiny unknown church on the outskirts of the city. And I love this parable so much because it's funny. I don't know if you all experience this, but sometimes when I'm confronted with waiting, especially if I'm waiting to hear God or to see God, I often feel like as I look back on it, that God was there and I missed it. That I was unable to see God, that there was this presence, and I turned and asked the presence, "When are you going to show up, God? When are you going to arrive?" I have this visceral memory, and it's of a time in which I was working in a job that was really, really toxic and unhealthy, and I was crying out to God, like, "Where are you? Why am I in this fiery pit of hell? Feels like I'm waiting for something that's never going to happen. It feels like I'm consumed with terror all around me." And I was sitting in a it was kind of like a prayer chapel, like a makeshift prayer chapel, and there was a wooden cross up on the wall beside me, and I had this really visceral visual image of Christ sitting on the edge of the cross. So if you could, yeah. Okay, so you can see that cross right there, sitting on one of these sidebars of the cross, dangling his feet, swinging his feet. And it was both awareness and presence and distance, and in the midst of this waiting, in the midst of this, what felt like despair, I still didn't recognize that as presence, right? I still didn't recognize that as a rival. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized that was like probably one of the most transcendent spiritual experiences I've ever had. So much so that I got a tattoo. These are nightingales, by the way. And being able to hear God's voice clearest at night, sort of as a metaphor for darkness and despair. And when I hear this parable, it makes me think about all the spaces in which we are waiting, like we're waiting for a pandemic to be over. We're waiting. We're about to enter into Lent in this in this period of discernment, and we're going to be talking about lament as our series theme for Lent. And there's just going to be a lot of this type of engagement with ourselves and with God. And so I wanted to remind us that that Jesus sometimes shows up in places where we don't expect. And also, sometimes we think we have the voice of God figured out. Sometimes we think that we just tune it to the right station and that we'll always have this wavelength of God that's nonstop. But that sometimes what it really looks like is like we have to turn the dial. We have to turn the dial a little bit to hear, to really sort of channel spirit and get in contact with the divine. And so I don't know if you have practices for doing that. I would be so curious to know how you hear God. Do you hear God? Do you want to hear God? Do you ask to hear God? In your prayers, is that something that feels really important in your spiritual journey? Is being able to tap into God's voice? And I mean, for me, it's always been part of my spiritual journey. It's the thing that I find sometimes is hardest to do, right? We're all busy. There are a million things going on all the time. Sometimes it can be hard because we're tuned into so many different channels to be able to try to discern where we hear spirit moving. And I think that she is speaking. I do. And I think sometimes we just are hard of hearing and aren't able to be able to hear or engage with what she is saying. And sometimes that makes it hard when we're on this journey of waiting and of lament and of grief and of despair. It can make it really, really difficult. So I hope that you enjoyed that parable. I really, really do. And it's just funny to me to the other thing too is, right, the Messiah shows up and nothing's changed. Which this goes back to what we were talking about in the children's message yesterday. Like, there's a difference between passive waiting and active waiting. If we're waiting for the second coming of the Messiah, if you believe in that sort of thing, there's also like an accountability to the work of making sure that people are not oppressed, and feeding people and giving people affordable housing. And, like the work of the kingdom goes alongside the waiting. I mean, that felt like a cool connection too with that parable. All right. So that's what I got. I don't know if that means anything to you, but it's what I was thinking about today. So there we are. Let's say a prayer. God, on this Monday, the start of a new day, breathe into us fresh breath. Draw us near to you. Help us to tune ourselves to your station, to be on your wavelength, to be able to engage with your voice. And as we enter into a period of discernment and lament, stay right there beside us. Enter into the church and the crowded, small corner where the people are praying, and don't leave. Be there tomorrow and forever still, and help us to recognize your face. Help us to recognize the beauty of you as a desert wanderer, the validity of your experience and of your worth, and to know that when you took on human flesh, you said, "Me too. Me too." May we always feel your solidarity and your strength. Grant us courage in the days ahead, and hope for the rest. It's in the name of the triune God that we pray together. Amen. Well, it's been awesome to be with you today. I hope that you'll stick around our social media for all the things that are to come this week. I also hope you know that we love you and we care about you and we miss you. You can always reach out to us, send us email. You can reach out to just the Foundry General box and they can get it to where it needs to go, foundryumc@foundryumc.org. If you ever want to request prayer, you can do that on our website at foundryumc.org/prayer, and that comes directly to our clergy group. We would love to pray for you and show up for you. We just really, really miss you, and I'm feeling that today. So if you're feeling that, just know you're not alone. All right. Well, love, and as always, good noon, everybody.